Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Spiritual Survival. My mission is to help you recognize the times we live in and take unprecedented measures to prepare yourself spiritually. I'm your host, Randy Brown, and I hope you'll be empowered and uplifted. Today's episode, titled End Time Covenant Protection, is intended to wake us all up to the end time events that Isaiah tells us are at our doorstep. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. Today's format for our podcast is going to be a little bit different than the previous two, and we're very fortunate today to have a conversation with Rodolfo Vergara. I've become acquainted with Rodolfo through the Isaiah Institute, and he comes across to me as a very humble, modest, sincere person. Who just deeply loves the scriptures. And I relate to that because I feel the same way about the scriptures. And Rodolfo, in his search to understand the scriptures, has been led to Isaiah and the Isaiah Institute. Those of you who have seen my previous episodes, you'll know that my wife and I had a very powerful spiritual awakening in 2020. And that the intensity of that awakening hasn't gone away. It's probably only gotten stronger, and it's led us to a powerful desire to see and understand and search Isaiah. And I want to make that a big part of my podcast. My podcast is all about spiritual survival. And the first two episodes I've dedicated a little bit more to President Nelson's words about binding ourselves to Christ in covenants. And I believe that Isaiah is essentially saying the same thing, but gives us a vision of things that are incredible. So Rodolfo, welcome.
Well, thank you. And I'm very glad. I'm very thrilled for everything you are doing, Randy. And yeah, this is such a great, it's such a need that I love when people is like, you feel the prompting and you start sharing your passion, and it's already reaching people, so that this is great. Thank you for what you're doing.
Sometimes I get a little bit afraid if I say the word Isaiah, people's eyes glaze over, but I hope if I can, if I can begin getting a grasp on this, I think anybody can. You just have to know the tools, and that's what Isaiah Institute has done, is provided some tools that make it very doable, and it's just been an incredible spiritual awakening.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So what I'd like to talk about today is, kind of the wake-up call that I've had, and maybe you can help kind of lead us on a wake-up call today by getting us into some things that will maybe help us see what's ahead of us, the stark reality of the things that are at the door. That we
yes, for sure. One thing that, well, I think my journey through Isaiah begins, of course, with Nephi, probably in the Book of Mormon, and I always enjoy spending time reading the scriptures, but then I got really bothered when I start reading through verses that didn't make any sense to me, and the question was, why that is there? Why the Lord will put something in the scriptures that doesn't make any sense or is incomprehensible, and I got bothered by that. I realized it was something personal to me, that I cannot move on if I don't figure it out. And so usually now when I read something, I know that it's there for a purpose, and I know if I pray and then do research, I know the Lord can show the answer for almost anything. So when I start hitting those chapters in Isaiah and the Book of Mormon, that was the first, my first encounter with this dilemma, that I cannot keep moving. I can just pass through them, or I can pray to the Lord, help for understanding, and then do research. And everything led me eventually to the Isaiah Institute. And then to me, that was just a catalyst for more. And then it's been just such a fascinating journey. And one thing with Isaiah is that the word Isaiah means God is salvation. And that's the message. Usually the prophet's name in Hebrew is the message. And that is we're gonna go, and I think the Lord is gonna try to show us a very scary scene, to say that despite all of that, he can still, he is the mighty one of Jacob. He is the Lord of hosts, and he is the one who can deliver us from anything, and there is no enemy that the Lord cannot overcome. So that is why I think sometimes we see such a graphic depiction of Isaiah and his prophecy. So then he can also say, despite all of that, God is still God, the God of Israel. Anyway, so let me share one quick thing, if I can share my screen. Randy, is that okay?
You bet.
So in 75, this is the Lord in 75:20. And the Lord is talking here to the Nephites, and in chapter 16, he introduced Isaiah in chapter 16. He's introducing Isaiah 50, chapter 52. And then here in verse 11, the Lord says, "Ye remember that I spake unto you, and I said that when the words of Isaiah shall be fulfilled." So he's going back to what he mentioned at the end of chapter 16. "Behold, they are written, ye have them before you, therefore search them." And then we have an even stronger commitment in 35:23. But then he says, "Verily I say unto you that when they shall be fulfilled, then is the fulfilling of the covenant which the Father had made unto his people, O house of Israel." So the words of Isaiah are the fulfillment of the promises that the Lord made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so that's what we're reading. The Lord has a promise he made to his people, and then he needs to fulfill it. So everything that's going to happen is in function of that covenant. So that it's very easy to go to Isaiah, go to the depressing chapters, and then lose focus of what the purpose is. It's the promises, is that the Lord fulfill his covenants, like you mentioned. And one more, this is in 1 Nephi 22. This is Nephi's summary of his vision, what he saw, and then the words of Isaiah from 1 Nephi 20 and 21, which is Isaiah 48 and Isaiah 49. And this is what Nephi says, that about the fulfilling of the covenant. He mentioned about the great marvelous work that's going to be among the Gentiles. And then he mentioned that the Lord wants to fulfill that covenant with Abraham, and thy seed, all kindreds of the earth shall be blessed. This is what Nephi said then. And I would, my brethren, that ye should know that all the kindreds of the earth cannot be blessed unless he shall make bare his arm in the eyes of all nations. So you can link those two scriptures from Nephi 20, 11 and 12, and this one here, that Isaiah is the fulfilling of this covenant, but for that covenant to be fulfilled, the Lord needs to bear his arm in the eyes of all nations. So the arm can be a code name for his servant, but also can be a code name for his power. He's going to shake the earth in a way that people are going to be forced to recognize that he is the God of Israel. So I just want to throw that as a quick introduction of the topic. Do you have any thoughts, Randy?
Yeah, actually, I hope this doesn't throw you off your your train of thought, but I noticed in your email signature, you had a verse from 2 Nephi.
Yes.
In the days that the prophecies of Isaiah shall be fulfilled, men shall know of a surety at the times when they shall come to pass. And that's 2 Nephi 25:7. Any thoughts on why you've included that on your
Well,
email?
because well, that's Nephi's prophecy, and so at the time, Nephi said at the time when the prophecies of Isaiah shall be fulfilled, men shall know for surety. One is that for men to know that, okay, now I see that Isaiah has been fulfilled. First, they need to be familiar with Isaiah. So something is going to happen. We believe that somehow people are going to take us Isaiah seriously, or take it as a roadmap for what really is coming. It's an end time prophecy, and then second one is a global work. Nephi in those chapters, he's talking to his brethren. He's very specific when he speaks to the Nephites or the Lamanites, and then he also speaks to the Gentiles. And there is one verse in 2 Nephi 29, excuse me. So he defined the groups, his brethren, my people usually are the Nephites there, and the Gentiles are another group. But now in that verse, he specifically said that the children of men shall know of a surety, which that includes a global, a universal audience that they will come to know the prophecy of Isaiah being fulfilled. So that sent the scope, because we have given so much as Latter-day Saints to understand Isaiah and the Book of Mormon. We have so many literary keys, even the Isaiah Institute, but we have only reached just a portion of what we would love to reach, which eventually we know is going to be a global audience. So that's why I have that verse, because it reminds me of that Isaiah is going to be the magnitude of the understanding of Isaiah is going to come to every nation, kingdom, tongue, people.
So we might as well start now.
Right?
Searching it.
And I think that's why let me ask you then, why you felt prompted to start, because you can done so many things about spiritual preparation, but why to link back to Isaiah for you?
Well, like you said, Isaiah is an end time scenario. And once I really came to understand that just totally changed everything. And that verse that you just talked about, it's we can know of a surety. You know, by searching Isaiah, we can know what's coming. Not only that, we can know the Lord. We can know him covenantally. We can know, and I think most important, we can know his promise of hope that in the covenants of the Lord, we can have protection. And I think that's essential if we're going to survive not only spiritually, but actually physically.
Yes, and the Lord, actually Isaiah speaks to that there is a temporal salvation. If you read what happened to Noah in the Pearl of Great Price in Moses chapter 7, the Lord is telling Enoch that Noah is going to be saved with a temporal salvation. And in that temporal salvation and in the end time is also is available through the understanding of the emperor and vassal covenant relationship, that if we keep the law of the Lord, then he is bound to protect. And that's why the idea of a king, Nephi says a protector, and in 2 Nephi chapter 6 verse 3, he said that a king is a protector. And we have also the Melchizedek priesthood role is to be a prophet, priest, and also a king. And then we have the kings and queens of the Gentiles and Isaiah 49. So there is so much embedded there that is implying that we are going to see some temporal protection, because as the Lord needs to have a people that he can come and recognize at his second coming.
Yeah. Another thing that kind of opened up Isaiah to me is what he says in Isaiah 44:7.
Uh-huh.
Who predicts what happens, as do I. and is the equal of me in appointing a people of old as types, foretelling things to come. That just helped me to be able to see that everything that Isaiah is including, it's not to be read as a history, it's to be read as a type for what's coming and what we're going to see. And it just kind of amazes me the glory of God that he can orchestrate humanity's circumstances in this way so that it ends up, prophesying and warning us of what's going to happen before the second coming.
That's spot on. Yes, because then you have the some of the historical accounts in 2 Kings 18, 19 with King Hezekiah, and we see that there is various differences on who he's omitting versus who he's adding sometimes in Isaiah 36 and 37, because he doesn't want to give us a historical account. Isaiah is not history more than it's a type for the end time, like you mentioned, Isaiah 44:7, Isaiah 46:10 mentioned that he showed us the end from the beginning. So we are seeing the end from the types that Isaiah is mentioning. And also, and like you mentioned, the book for the end time, this is in Isaiah chapter 30, verse 8. And this is the oracle against the warning not to trust Egypt, as Egypt represents the arm of flesh. But then in verse 8, the Lord tells Isaiah, go now and write on tablets concerning them, recorded in a book for the end time, a testimony forever. And that's what Isaiah was instructed to do, is to have a record that was for actually the end time people, and something that needs to how do you say this, needs to pass the test of time, needs to be as valid as it was for them, for the people in the end time. Actually, that's his audience, he's talking to us, and everything else is coded in the types of the people and places that he prophesied when he was alive. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah. So again, my podcast is about surviving spiritually. I think in order to survive spiritually, we have to kind of know what to prepare for. And my hope is to kind of wake people up, like my wife and I were awakened, to the covenant curses and the loss of protection that could very soon be coming upon America and the world, and to know what we're preparing for. As I try to talk to people about what I've been learning, it's kind of shocking that a lot of people don't actually believe that there is a real end-time Antichrist. Somehow we don't talk about that, or we kind of keep things kind of sanitized, I guess, and don't.
Yes.
Isaiah doesn't do that, even though it's encrypted. And apparently Nephi wasn't allowed to talk about it, and President Nelson talks more about the covenants and the loyalty. But maybe you could show us some things about the reality of what we need to prepare for.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think, we have some type of sequence that we usually hear about how things will go from now to the second coming, and I think we usually hear from a very short, a very high overview version of wars and rumors of war, and then everything will be in commotion, and then the Lord will come, and that's it. But we go, like you said, Isaiah doesn't have any reservations in saying what really is coming. And part of that is, and Nephi also mentioned some of this in his own prophecy, and more in detail, I will say, than the vision. So in 2 Nephi 26 and 27, and then in chapter 30, I can jump there in a second, but he described a massive destruction upon the Gentiles. And I think that's what we're seeing also in Isaiah, because we need to now superimpose Isaiah to an end time scenario. That's why, just to do one more foundational verse. So if you go to and 35:20, chapter 23, verse, we all know these verses. Verse, I think it's 1 and 2. So the Lord says, I'll give you search these things diligently, for great are the words of Isaiah, for surely he spake as touching all things concerning my people, which are of the house of Israel. Therefore, it must needs that he must speak also to the Gentiles. Now, this is a chunk of text, but it's a chiasm. So you have that the Lord, he mentioned that, for example, he surely speak all things touching my people who are of the house of Israel. And that's why he said in all things. So you have all things here, all things he spake, all things that he spake has been and shall be, even according to the word which he spake. So if you break down the chiasm, technically it's saying that all things he spake has been and shall be. What has been was all things pertaining to the house of Israel, and what shall be refers to the Gentiles. So that's the superimpose that we need to do, that as how the house of Israel was scattered and destroyed, then the Gentiles are going to be also destroyed because of covenant curses, except a remnant, the same way that there was a remnant in Jerusalem that the Lord preserved. We're going to see also a remnant in the New Jerusalem. And so Isaiah chapter 1, and one thing that we see is it begins with this, hear, O heavens, give hear, O earth, Jehovah has spoken. So when you call heaven and earth, because of Deuteronomy, Moses said that you're calling witnesses. So you call witnesses unless something has been broken as far as something legal, specifically covenant. So that is something that's not something wrong. And the Lord and Isaiah the Lord is making Isaiah declare that he's not called witnesses, because again, that's the first domino effect of Isaiah prophecy. And then what we are going to see right away is we see a prophet. It's called in Hebrew a prophetic perfect, that he's speaking that this is going to happen, but then there is a conditional aspect. People are going to determine if they're destroyed or delivered. But what we read first is that your land is ruined, your cities are burned with fire, your native soul is devoured by aliens in your presence, laid waste, and it's taken over by foreigners. So he's prophesying about people who is seeing a foreign enemy coming to the land. And so that's the first indication that, okay, destruction is coming. Now, we don't see much on that.
Can I interrupt you for just a second?
Yeah, please go for it.
So, is this a prophecy that would apply to America? I mean, we're a covenant land.
Yes.
And this idea of foreign invaders coming.
Yes, and that's prophesied. Yeah, that's a decree on the land, right? Lehi said that there was a decree on the land in 2 Nephi chapter 1, that the Lord, if people don't keep the commandments, well, Moroni mentioned actually there is a decree on the land in Ether chapter 2, that the Lord, well, and 2 Nephi is when he mentioned that I will send other nations that will possess the land. And anyway, so how can we attribute this to America? Because back then the prophecy was done to Jerusalem and Judah, And again, Jerusalem and Judah are code names for where the end time covenant people are, which is America. And then, yeah, so that's why the chiasm and 25:23 is key, because what has been was house of Israel, what shall be are the Gentiles. We need to use that as a literary key. So yeah, a foreign enemy. That's the first indication that something is coming in the prophecy of Isaiah. Then it goes, well, to more news. I think bad news. 3 is when we see more of a we see anarchy, right? We see all the social structure then taken apart, and the Lord keep hammering that again. It's His people that are not they're not bringing forth that fruit that He expects. And then we go to chapter 5. If we just go very quickly, and then here we have a song about His vineyard, that the Lord had an expectation for the vineyard, but then it produced, instead of grapes, it produced wild grapes. And then the expectation He mentioned was righteousness. Anyway, so the Lord said, I will expose the vineyard. He will take there is a hedge, which is a protection that He had all that time to that beautiful place. Now He's gonna remove it, and He's gonna burn it. The same metaphor for fire that we see in chapter 1. But then here is when He goes more in details what He means by this. That is this is verse 24. As a blazing fire consumes stubble, and as the dry weed wane before the flame, so shall the roots decay and the blossoms fly like dust. So we have the metaphor of trees, of a vineyard. It's going to be burned. And now we see the anger of Jehovah is kindled against His people. He draw back His hand against them and strike them. And no, so we are going to build on metaphors until then the Isaiah is going to tell us actually this represents an individual and an army that's coming. Then verse 26, He rises an ensign to distant nations and summons them beyond the horizon. And now this army comes, and they come swiftly and speedily. None of them grows weary, nor does any stumble. They do not draw or fall asleep. And the arrows are sharp, their bows are strong, and the tread of their war horses resemble flint. Their chariots will revolve like a whirlwind. They have the roar of a lion, and they arose like young lions. Anyway, he is.
Rodolfo, can I jump in for a quick second?
Yeah, please.
Oh, I'm sure a lot of my my listeners would be very new to Isaiah, and so I was just kind of wanting to see if I'm interpreting this correctly. And so it sounds to me like this is a warning to America, because we're His covenant people, and this is a covenant land, and that we have been under covenant protection.
Absolutely.
And as America degenerates into a land where we're not keeping covenant with the Lord, that this protection that's been over His vineyard is taken away and invaded by these armies, and the vineyard is burned. Is that a correct interpretation?
That's correct. And there is a remnant that is going to survive. We see that in the next chapter. In the previous chapter, Isaiah always is keep telling us that there is a remnant, that he uses the metaphor of that even the tree that's been cut, that is going to grow again, like the oak or the terebinth. So, but you're right. There was a point in time that we have this hedge of protection, and now the Lord is going to remove that. But it's doing it because, again, it's a consequence of the people, of the nation, of the collective, the desire to serve the Lord of the land, or we're going to go against Him. And there are so many you can see the parallels today, right? I remember President Hinckley saying 2020 that he saw back then that the days were worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. But now we're seeing that, I think 23 years later, it's even worse. It's exponential, and the damage that people are absolutely, they don't want to do anything with God, and that's going to backfire, because again, there is something attached to the land that is a decree, and if they break that, then the Lord is justified to, again, to go and turn against them. So now we have the first, actually Isaiah mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah type in chapter 1, also in chapter 2. And then this goes evolving more and more. We have the idea of fire. Now we see an army as fire. And then we have the historical chapters. So Isaiah received his calling in chapter 6, and the Lord calls Isaiah to prophesy. And then how long Isaiah said. And Isaiah here is playing also a type of what we call the end time servant, that he's going to prophesy and warn about this. But then he said, the Lord told Isaiah, until the cities lie desolate, that's how long he needs to prophesy. And without inhabitant, in houses without men, and the land ravaged and ruined. And there is a new Exodus type of, like in the past. Now, if we go forward to 7 and 8, here is where, okay, 1 to 5, we are giving us a metaphor, what is going to happen. Now, 6 to 8 are more historical. But now here it says using types, like you mentioned, Isaiah 44:7, that we're going to use people of old as types. And the conflict that we are seeing here is we have the king of the time, the king of Judah, which was King Ahaz, and he was a very wicked king. You can read more about him in 2 Kings chapter 16. But he heard a noise or rumor that we see the northern kingdom, which is Israel, and Damascus, they made an alliance, and they made a plot, an evil plot against them. And this is Ephraim, which is was the head tribe of the northern kingdom of Samaria. They combined with Damascus, or back then was Aram. And he was so afraid of them that he sought to make a covenant with the superpower that was rising for protection. He makes a covenant with the king of Assyria. Now, Isaiah comes, and the Lord told Isaiah, go and prophesy to Ahaz, don't make that covenant, because if you make that covenant, it's going to backfire. It's going to turn against you. And so Isaiah goes to Ahaz, and he talks to him about not making this covenant. He offered him a sign, offer any sign to prove you that the Lord is going to protect the people. But he was very afraid. He didn't know the Lord at all. So he said that I will not, how he says it here, I will not put Jehovah to the test in verse 12. Anyway, so then what happens is that he's going to make the covenant, and Isaiah is going to prophesy something called in verse 17 here. Because of that, Jehovah will bring you and your people and your father's house a day like any since Ephraim broke away from Judah, the day of the king of Assyria. And now we have more a personification of what this destruction upon this land of back then was Judah, but superimposing. And I think the type and the end time, we should see something like that. We should see some type of alliances that are going to be formed. And that's why next chapter, if we just go, I won't go to every chapter, but just to give you an idea, at the end, the Lord is telling Isaiah to not, well, I think the translation that Abraham has here is, do not call a conspiracy, all that these people call a conspiracy, be not afraid. Because the word actually is confederacy. So we're going to see these alliances of nations. Back then, in the end time, we should see something similar. People are going to make these alliances, and these alliances actually are going to turn. One of them is going to be with the king of Assyria. And we're going to be deceived that he's going to somehow protect. But this is what happens. This is Isaiah mentioned about the king of Assyria, again, prophesying to the people. And this is when he introduced his son, Maher Shalal Hashbash, which means destruction is coming imminent. And he is going to plunder the land. He mentioned, therefore, will my Lord cause to come upon over them the great mighty rivers, the mighty waters of the river, the king of Assyria and all his glory. He will rise up over all his channels and overflow his banks. And this is a parallel with Isaiah chapter 5, when the Lord had a hedge of protection. The Lord had a boundary on this individual, but now, because of that covenant, he's going to overflow. He's going to be able to reach. He will sweep Judea like a flood, and passing through reach the very neck. Now, Judea was the land of the southern kingdom, and the capital is Jerusalem. The neck, the head is Jerusalem, but he's going to reach almost the very neck. Jerusalem is going to be protected. His outspread wings will span the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel. And Emmanuel is a code name for actually for the people of the Lord, for Zion, who's going to be being born under tribulation. So, yeah, please.
Let me interrupt again just for a second. Sorry. So for those again in my listening audience who are brand new to this, am I right in understanding that this is the end time Antichrist?
Yes.
And with his alliance of nations that he's going to put together, they're going to sweep across America like a flood. Whenever you see flood or overflowing, it's these armies just flooding over our country and causing this destruction. Is that
yeah? Well, not just America. He will go
all over the world.
He will overflow. Yes, because he again, and that's what we learn in Joseph Smith translation of Matthew 24, that the end of the world is the destruction of the wicked. And we're going to see that the Lord commissioned the Antichrist, or the beast, as we call it in the book of Revelation, the king of Assyria as a type. He is commissioned to destroy the godless or the hypocritical. We have a nation, but it's a group of people, and he's going to do that. He's going to just go and conquer. But then eventually also comes to America. Now, Emmanuel means God is with us. So despite the covenant, the covenant that these nations do, if people abide to the covenants with God, then they have there is a promise for them that God will be with them and they will be delivered. But it's not reach the very neck. And there is another warning, because your channel is about, right, spiritual preparedness. I think the most important thing will be to really learn to trust in the Lord, because as he is coming, Isaiah prophesied that a lot of people, instead of going to that place of safety, now Jerusalem was a place of safety. We see that the Moabites are called to go and find Jerusalem, or what is called the Tent of David in Isaiah chapter 15. But the going to Jerusalem for protection was the more counterintuitive thing to do back then. They don't have the army capability, they didn't have the supplies. So what they did, most of these nations and people, they went to Egypt for protection. And those are the chapters here from 30 to 31 that the Lord is telling them, if you go to Egypt, you're going to be destroyed. The only way to survive the beast is going to be trusting in the Lord. Eventually, it's going to go find that place of safety, which might be something that might look not a big refuge as Egypt. I think other things are going to be in place in the end time that people are going to trust. But the people who actually go to the New Jerusalem, the Lord won't, the Antichrist or the beast won't be able to reach that place. It will reach the neck. But that's going to be the test of faith of God's people.
Another thing that Isaiah teaches, and I'm going to go into this a little bit in my next podcast, is this concept of a ladder to heaven.
Yes.
And that we progress spiritually from one level to another. And that this test in the end time for us, will be tested to see if we'll be loyal to our covenants, and we'll be tested to limits we probably can't even imagine. But as we prove faithful to those, his covenant promises are in place. And like you said, in Zion, we will be protected. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, right on. Yeah. And we're gonna I want to end today when I finish with that as good, because if we can go, because it's not just a place, it's also a people. I should have said that. But if people can ascend to a higher level spiritually, which is going to be Zion, then he cannot do anything against them. We see the same happen with Enoch and in Moses chapter 7, that the Lord blessed Zion and the Lord then cursed everywhere else. There is a division, and that's part of that division that Nephi mentioned in 2 Nephi chapter 30 verse 10, that a great division is coming. And that division is not just opinion division, but it's going to be a spiritual division. These are the 10 virgins and the all of this example of the wheat and the tares and so forth. But that division is a spiritual division that Nephi mentioned that, right? In 1 Nephi 14:7, that I will do a great marvelous work for one hand or the other. And one hand, the hand of the destruction and captivity is the beast, is the king of Assyria, is the Antichrist. And then we see the other hand, this is verse 7, right? And the other hand that's going to convince them to peace and eternal life and deliverance is going to be God's end-time servant, and it's going to be the fullness of the gospel and the ascension that's going to be available for people who decide to go in that direction. So it's up to us. I think a lot of people are also put in positions themselves to maybe pay an ultimate price, but what we're reading, that a lot of the outcome is going to happen according to what people choose to do, choose to ascend, choose to descend. God is going to be available for them. So thank you for that, Randy. Do you have any other thoughts on this?
Well, as mysterious as the king of Assyria is to most people, being a type of this end time Antichrist, even more mysterious to most people is the concept of an end time Moses-like deliverer. We have this type in the Old Testament of Moses with this incredible power that he's been endowed with, to deliver Israel from seemingly impossible odds of the greatest army on the earth, the Egyptian army. And that's a type of a deliverance that we'll experience here in the last times. And maybe you could touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. And I was going to jump because then we have, again, the king of Assyria has been now revealed as what is going to overflow. And then here's when we have more on the king of Assyria, but also then 11 actually show us about the other individual, but which is the hand of deliverance. The last point on the king of Assyria is, this is the law. This is Isaiah 10. This is Isaiah mentioned that, again, he's coming because of oppression, because of the dysfunction that is on the people. We see that there is neglection on the poor of my people, the widow and the fatherless have been neglected. Now, this can represent Babylon, a system, because Babylon is all a system of classes where the higher and the hierarchy benefit, and the ones who are below doesn't benefit from that. So Zion can represent wickedness, but also represents the world as an unfair system as it is today. Also, these can be codes for the house of Israel, that the Gentiles, which are the Ephraimites, that's another conversation for another day, but they have a right to reach. The seed of Lehi has a right to the land. The Jews have a right also to that. And although maybe an effort has been done, the Lord expects more for Israel to be gathered literally. And then the widow actually is a code name for Zion in Isaiah 54. And the fatherless is the house of Israel. That's why then the kings and queens of the Gentiles are going to be foster fathers and nursing mothers to the house of Israel. Anyway, that is a problem there, a dysfunction, that something is not happening. Because of that, the Lord said, what will you do on the day of reckoning? King James, I think, translate this as the day of visitation, when the Holocaust overtake you from afar. And this is back to Isaiah 5. They come from a distant land beyond the horizon. This is a foreign entity. To whom will you flee for help? Where will you leave your wealth? And that there is no material possession too that actually will do any good more than the spiritual preparedness. And anyway, so then he mentioned that
We're going to see a Holocaust.
Say that again?
We're going to see a Holocaust.
Yes. Yeah.
And,
yes.
I mean, we've witnessed the Holocaust in, during World War II and to the Jews, but this will be a similar thing, but on just a massive, massive scale.
Yeah. That's what, let's see, Habakkuk mentioned that in the book of Habakkuk, chapter 1, and also Hosea, Joel, chapter 2, he mentioned that what is coming, this army that's coming, is not create a distraction like we have never seen or we will ever see after. So this is the great, the Lord is going to allow it to happen because, again, he needs to wake up the people, and then he needs to shake the earth. He needs to raise his hand on the eyes of all nations. So that's why he mentioned, held the Assyrian, the rod of my anger, he is a staff, my wrath in their hand. Now, this is the problem. It's verse 6. I will commission him against a godless nation. So he has a commission. The Lord said, okay, you guys don't want to live without God, without religion in your life, without covenants, then this is what you will get. And
what you're saying is that the Lord allows this to happen.
Yes.
As part of the bringing down of the defenses, and
yes,
and this is his way of cleansing the earth, so that Zion can come into being.
Absolutely, that's what it's called, Randy, and the scriptures is called the strange act.
Mm-hmm.
It's in Doctrine and Covenants, I think it's 95 verse 4. It's also in section 101. I think it's 98 or somewhere there. But this is in Isaiah 28. I think it's in verse 21 that the Lord will again do a strange act, because it doesn't make sense the Lord will allow this to happen, but he is allowing it to happen as a consequence. But also he is going to make available an option for the people where they want to be. I have a graphic that I'll show in a second, but he said that the Lord is commissioned him, appointing him to a people deserving of my vengeance. This is called in the scripture also the day of vengeance. And then he's the one who's gonna spoil, he's gonna tread underfoot. And the scriptures, when the covenants are like the salt of the earth. When you keep those covenants, section 103 mentioned that if you are saviors of men, then you are like the salt of the earth. But if you are not, then you become a salt that loses savior and is good for nothing but to be tread underfoot. He's not Buddha. He comes as a curse. Nevertheless, so although I commission him to do this, nevertheless, it shall not seem so to him. And here is the problem, because although the Lord is allowing him to go and do something, this shall not be what he has in mind. His purpose should be to annihilate and exterminate nations, not a few. So he's gonna not just do his commission to destroy the wicked. The Lord will allow that to happen. He's not going to also try to even go beyond that and go even to Jerusalem back then, to God's people. So that's the problem. We are going to allow it to happen, and he's not reached the very neck.
That's the ultimate wake-up call.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the purpose of my my podcast, is to help people see why we need to wake up.
Yeah, and this is what keep Isaiah awake. This is in chapter 24. Isaiah refused to be comforted. He said his pain was like a woman in travail. He refused to be delivered. This is what keep Daniel also awake. In Daniel 7, Daniel 8. When they saw what was going to happen, they saw the depiction of the graphic scene of this annihilation that he's going to try to do. And again, he's going to try to he's not turn against God. That's why he is now in this chapter. He's the type of the axe, and the Lord is telling him, shall the axe exalt itself above the one who hews with it. So the Lord using him as an axe, but then the axe is trying to exalt to him, like to the person who was using it. He's not trying to turn against God, and he's not turn against everything that every believer too. That's more graphic in the book of Revelation. But the seal the Lord is saying, I knew this was going to happen, and that's why the Lord also has something for protection. And that's chapter 11, which is we have what is called the root of Jesse in verse 10, which is, we have a definition of him. Sorry, Randy.
Oh yeah, just saying, one thing that has helped me begin to see what Isaiah is saying is seeing his use of these metaphorical pseudonyms.
Yes.
Like the word axe,
Yes.
Axe is a pseudonym for the king of Assyria or the Antichrist. And flood, that is a pseudonym for him and these armies that are flooding across the earth, reaping destruction.
Yeah.
So when we start to learn some of these pseudonyms and code words, and then we can start to read it and go, oh, okay, I see what that means. Anyway.
No, that makes sense, right? Because he will raise an ensign to the nation. So we have an ensign in chapter 5 that I read. That's an ensign of destruction, but now we have also an ensign of deliverance. And that's what the Lord won't leave us alone. He's preparing he foresaw all of this, of course, from the beginning. And it's going to be very scary, but the Lord is going to punish actually the king of Assyria as he tried to go after his people if they stay faithful. And that's happened in Isaiah 37. The ones who stood there, they were delivered. I want to finish with that chapter. I have a few more things on that, but the root of Jesse is the other one that maybe one day you can cover that, Randy, more for your audience. But we know as a person because of section 113, when there's a Q&A about Isaiah 11 and Isaiah 50, 52, 51. And we know there that it's a servant in the hands of Christ, who's a descendant of Jesse, also Joseph, Ephraim, who he has the keys of a right to the keys of the kingdom and the priesthood, and he is for an ensign to the people. And again, he is going to be somebody who's going to play a role as Moses. He's like one like unto Moses, and from Deuteronomy 18, the prophecy about that. And also he is he's not playing an intercessor role as King Hezekiah did back then, which we learned that in Isaiah 38. And because of that, he's able to provide the umbrella of protection to people who understand the covenants. Anyway, this is a graphic, and I don't know if you're going to show this or not, but this is a quick graphic that I did on you mentioned there is spiritual categories, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Isaiah, you have perdition, which is in Isaiah 14. We see that there is the Antichrist becomes a son of perdition, which not many people can become a son of perdition. To tell you the level of the category of spiritual category of this individual, the beast in the book of Revelation. In Revelation, we learned that the beast is going to go in Revelation 17, is going to go to the lake of fire and brimstone. And Satan is going to go to the abyss, or the bottomless pit. So there are two places in the underworld. There are multiple places, but the abyss is a place, it's like a jail for rebellious spirits or rebellious individuals. No, it's not the same than Sheol, which is the paradise where we have an Alma 40. This is a place for people who actually are openly rebelled against God. So Satan, after the millennium, he goes to the abyss, but the Antichrist goes to the worst, which is the lake of fire and brimstone. So that to tell you that this guy is going to even get a bigger punishment than Satan. Now, Satan eventually at the end in Revelation 19, he goes after the 1,000 year, he goes back to that place. But we're talking about somebody who's, again, I don't think, although we have seen maybe some types of tyrants in the past, he's going to overpass all of them.
He's
Anyway,
like a Hitler on steroids.
Absolutely, yeah, Hitler, or yeah. We have a couple of types that they try to give us. Daniel gave us a type, also John, maybe with Nero. But you have the category of perdition, and then you have Babylon, and which is the wicked. And now in Isaiah, after these chapters, chapter 12 is about deliverance. We have the whole chapters again. It's called the oracles against the nations. And I think Abraham, I think King James translate a prophecy concerning the translation is oracle, but the Hebrew word is burden. And the word burden had the purpose of a prophecy as a burden, had the purpose to put pressure on the people. This is coming. You better repent. You better start turning to the Lord and prepare. And the preparation actually back then was to move to Jerusalem. And he started, the first oracle is Babylon, because Babylon represents now, it's a theme, it represents a category of people. And then all of the nations that we have, so we have Moab, and then we have Ephraim and Damascus, and then we have Egypt, and then we have in Isaiah 22, Tyre, and I think 20 also Egypt, and there are more. So we have all of Philistia, Moab, Ephraim, Egypt, Tyre. We have also Arabia, and I think Isaiah 21 at the end. So all of those nations, actually, if you highlight what Isaiah is telling against them, is prophesying against their sin represents the category. So we have Babylon as our overarching theme of the wicked, the sinners, the wicked, the tyrants. We have Philistia, those who don't achieve the elect status. We have Moab, which represent religious idolatry. Moab, they have shrines, they have temples, but they didn't turn to the Lord in the way they have to turn. And again, the Lord tells them that if they don't turn, they don't produce what the Lord expected them to produce, then they're going to be destroyed too. Although Isaiah really spent 2 chapters on Moab, and he cries for Moab. He was hoping that Moab actually go to Zion, which can be a type of them ascending to, as well as a physical place. Ephraim and Damascus, and these are the ones who are actually join the secret combinations and join the great abominable church. These are the Ephraimites who are part of that. And you read that warning from Nephi, well, from Jacob and Nephi, Jacob and 2 Nephi chapter 6 and 10, that to the Gentiles, do not join the great and abominable church and fight against Zion, because those are going to be the ones who are going to lick the dust of their feet and be destroyed. But we see that, we see Egypt, which Egypt becomes an idolatrous nation. Anyway, all of that is destroyed by the king of Assyria. All of that is going to be destroyed by him. Those are the oracle chapters. And then we start.
We're gonna think that this Antichrist, if we're not careful, we're gonna think that this Antichrist king of Assyria is a savior.
Yeah, absolutely, because these things, at some point, all of these nations, they fight against Zion too. This represents enemies of Jerusalem at some point. So that's why we need to be very careful. I don't know if we see the whole picture of how this is going to play out, but we know that the mark of the beast in Revelation 13 is a deception. And we know and I'll go very quickly, and I know I'm just speaking too much, but just to wrap up, one more last thing on here, on the king of Assyria, is that in the book of Revelation, the beast, in Revelation 17, we see the woman who is the whore, which is Mystery Babylon, and the mother of all harlots. And Babylon, again, as a category, is destroyed by the king of Assyria. And then we see at the end that the 10 horns of the beast, which is the king of Assyria, that's why he said, all of my commanders are kings. He mentioned that in Isaiah chapter 10. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore. So this shall hate Babylon, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So he's going to destroy, again, Babylon. So it can look for some believers that he might be doing a good favor, but again, he's going to go against them. That's the message that Isaiah is trying to tell us. And then actually good.
Babylon, is
go for it.
Babylon synonymous with the great and abominable church?
Yes.
The New World Order, the secret combination, it all comes under this umbrella of Babylon, right?
Yeah, and our system too is the elite. It's the people who use people as merchandise. That's what John is saying. So that's why there are 2 Babylons, 1 in 13, 1 in 47. There are a couple of distinctions. Maybe that's another discussion. But just to wrap up, the Lord in chapter 37, when he actually comes to Jerusalem, and he's tried to siege Jerusalem. So we know that they didn't have any supplies, food and water, and they offered them his spokesman. There is a spokesman for this king of Assyria in chapter 36. His name is Rabshakeh, and he is an apostate Jew. He was Jew at the moment, so he's able to translate for them. And he comes, and then he offered them, I will give you all of this if you just come and just leave the land and become they want them to become a vassal for the king of Assyria. But I said the king Hezekiah, he is the one who doesn't want to do any of that. He came out of actually the agreement that his father Ahaz put in place. he leaves that agreement. That's why actually tricks in the history account, he goes back against Jerusalem. But now here we see that he boasts himself against God. He calls Jehovah as one of the other gods he already destroyed. And then what King Hezekiah does is he takes all of these blasphemies, he takes them to the temple, and he's telling Jehovah that this is when he started interceding for the people. He takes these letters of him saying that he's a God, he's greater than God, which is Paul mentioned he will do, right? And 2 Thessalonians 2. And anyway, so he take all of these letters or this letter and tell them this is what he's saying about you. And then he asked for Jehovah to open your eyes and see, listen to the words Sanherib, this was the king of Assyria back then, has sent to mock the living God. And then here is where the Lord responds, the virgin daughter of Zion holds you in contempt to the king of Assyria. She laughs you to scorn, the daughter of Jerusalem shakes the head at you. And then he's telling them that the Lord knew from the beginning that have you not heard how I ordained this thing long ago, how in the days of old I planned it? Now I have brought to pass, you were destined to demolish nations and destroy the inhabitants. But then the Lord said that, and because of your snortings and belowings against me, which have mounted upon my ears, I will put a ring in your nose and my bit in your mouth. Now, the ring in your nose is a hook. That's a Hebrew word. And he's talking about the same imagery that Job mentioned, and I think it's in Job 39:40 about Leviathan, this beast that the Lord is telling Job, can you put a hook in his nose and tame him? He's saying, I'm Jehovah, I can do that. He's going to actually be able to overcome that beast. And then, anyway, so what happens at the end is that in verse 35, the Lord said that I will protect this city and save it for my sake and for the sake of my servant David. This is the Davidic covenant. Then the angel of Jehovah went out and slew 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. And yeah, that's how the Lord, back then, there was a miracle, there was an argument how it happened, but Isaiah is not worried about the history. He's telling us what it will happen in the future, that the Lord will deliver his people. And the message to me is, more than anything, is we see an angel, and that's singular. If you go back to Isaiah 31, we see here that what Israel was having a hard time while they were in Jerusalem, knowing the Assyrians were coming, they were freaking out. And the Lord said, woe, which is a curse to those who go down to Egypt for help, relying on horses, put their trust in inverse numbers. And so they were trying to rely on this massive army of Egypt, which the Assyrian destroyed. But how many hosts took the Lord to destroy the Assyrian army? One angel. And I think it's a message that he is the Lord of hosts, and it doesn't take more than one angel for him to destroy that mighty army of Assyria. He will do it. And the more we can get into the Isaiah prophecy, the more we can then understand who he really is. Now, things are going to happen, a wake-up call, like you mentioned, Randy, so we can put our life in order. We can start seeking to ascend higher to Zion, right? As Zion people, learn to receive personal revelation like we are commanded to do, and then learn from the prophecies and buckle up, because it's going to be a big distraction coming in. But the promise of deliverance should motivate us to actually turn to the Lord even harder. So that's what I have for today.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I think it can be a scary message, but for those who, make and keep covenants and keep their faith, hang on to the church, hang on to the prophet, hang on to your covenants. if we do, we'll see miracles, and we'll get through this through miraculous means. So again, thank you. Real quickly, could you share a couple of maybe tools or things that someone who wants to kind of venture out there and start to get a grasp on Isaiah? What are a couple of tools they can start
So
with?
this is a good website. I come here every day, isaiahexplained.com. And what you have here is in the menus, there are so many resources and tools. You have the key features. Because I just went over linear structure, but there is also a multi-layer asynchronous structure through the chapters too, which is maybe more advanced, but fun to go over. We have the spiritual levels. So when you're reading, sometimes, like I mentioned, Babylon can represent an entity, like you mentioned, the great abominable church. It can represent a conglomeration of places, but also can represent a spiritual category. So when you understand that, because Isaiah multi-layered his prophecy based on types, like Zion is delivered in Isaiah 37, Babylon is destroyed in Isaiah 13 and 47. And then the types, because like you mentioned, it's fun to see how the pseudonyms, like an axe, like a branch, they play a role, like a sword. There are two swords, one for destruction, one that actually punished them, Leviathan in Isaiah 27. So one thing you can do too is when you are in this website and you are reading a chapter, there are verses when you can highlight. And here we have Abraham Gileadi apocalyptic commentary, which is how this verse actually applied to the end time, more than the historical record. And every chapter also has an audio commentary. So so
my
that's
wife
plenty.
really enjoyed every day just listening to a chapter there and hearing the commentary, and so it's really helped her pick it up quick.
And I would say also the Book of Mormon, I think, was given as a warning too. It has the fullness of the gospel, but for the abridgment really follows the book of Isaiah. I think Mormon and Moroni, they mentioned they were influenced by Isaiah so much that I think the fashion of how the Book of Mormon was constructed was also a type. So the more it's reciprocal, the more we read Isaiah, the more the Book of Mormon then takes a whole new light. And then when we're reading the Book of Mormon, then we are seeing even more things that are highlighting about Isaiah that now this makes more sense. So I think if we try to really learn for ourselves, there is a lot of commentary out there, right? A lot of books, a lot of podcasts, but like you mentioned, you're telling people, giving tools, how to learn. Take it to yourself. Pray about it, pay the price. The Lord is the same for all of us. He will let anyone to know how to prepare as they dive into the scriptures and take away the fear. And also the sometimes prophecy it becomes something that people think that's for crazy people, right? We should not worry about it. But prophecy is a third of the scriptures for a reason. And we need to take the stigma out and digest why it's there, and then make any change if we have to make changes and prepare.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rodolfo.
Well, thank you.
Wonderful. I think if people can just take it a bite at a time and jump in and get started, and in a couple of years you'll be so glad you did. But thank you so much, and appreciate everybody being with us. Thank you.